Happy Devil's Wednesday. This is the State of the Fan Address presented by pucksandpitchforks.com. I am your host, Sam Wu, here with the editor-in-chief extraordinaire, Nick Villano, as we're streaming live on Facebook Live, YouTube Live, X Live, Twitch, and now on Instagram Live on the Let's Go Devils Network, coming to you live from the Primetime Radio Studios inside the bunkers of both North and South Jersey, covering the Garden State, talking Devils hockey. It's getting wild. It's getting wild here because we got a great guest coming up in about a few minutes. Josh from Evolving Hockey, Wild fan, but very, very smart individual, man of many talents. Without further ado, it is Nick Villano in some undisclosed location. Are you in South Jersey? I forgot to ask where you're at.
I'm not in South Jersey. I'm in an undisclosed vacation destination. But
Delaware?
Devil's News never sleeps. And so the Let's Go podcast cannot sleep.
Oh.
It's draft week. It's Simone Nemitz is a goner week. We have Josh on the line. I don't want to take too much time, but I do want to just give my quick thoughts on the Nemitz trade. I still don't like it, personally. I'm just not.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, it's too late first round picks, which are like, we're not talking about late first round picks in the NBA, but they're definitely not late first round picks in the NFL, right? We're talking about something like, I'd say like a 20 to 30% quality player rate, and even less star player rate, right? There's just not a lot of star players that come between 25 and 32, as we saw when the Devils were drafted there, right? You get the Jacob Josephsons and the Stefan Matteaus and the John Quenvilles, like their hit rate, and I know it's a different regime, but their hit rate there is atrocious.
I look at it differently, though.
I get it. Are you looking at it from this is just acquiring assets to make a bigger deal?
I'm looking for you do not have a negotiation headache over the summer to consume all your time when you've got many holes to fill. And if you want any shot of getting Quinn Hughes or Connor Hellebuck or whatever the fans are talking about, I don't even know if any of this is true or not. Or Jason Robertson, which is outrageous because I wouldn't do it anyway. It takes one problem off the board.
You can't start when we have a guest like this.
Oh, I know. All right.
Anyway, why don't we bring Josh from Evolving Wild on, and then let's talk to him.
Yeah.
So Josh, it's been a while, but we stopped the guest for a season, and now we're back, and You're our first guest in about a year. So
really,
I hope. Yeah, we kind of took a break for it. Not a year, I think, since like November. So I'm exaggerating pretty wildly, but it just got really hard to get in-season guests. Everybody's busy. I think there's been changing narratives around who can go on what and how contracts are written, but that's a beyond our pay grades kind of thing. You work for yourself, so I love having you on. You're one of our favorite guests. So I really
I'm happy
you
to.
Coming.
Yeah, I'm happy to be back. I think I was just trying to remember when the last time I was on, and I think it might have been like a year ago. Like I think we've done this now, like maybe every summer, and I think this is, and like you mentioned, I think having guests has been maybe tricky. This is, I think, the third week we've tried to do it. I think we were supposed to do it 2 weeks ago, and I was busy, and then last week maybe you guys were busy. So now I'm here, and yes, working for myself. So I was like, oh, contracts to go on a podcast. Like I'm in the wrong business here. I should be getting paid by myself to come on. Yeah, but I'm good. How are you guys?
Use that as a secondary salary, right? It's like, I'm going to take this part of my. This is the marketing budget, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. It that way. All right, so I got a million things to talk to you about, but I want to start with the Nemitz thing, obviously. One of the big things in Evolving Wild, and one of the things that we speak truth to gospel is your contract projections.
Yeah,
they've been really good over the years. They have a very high hit rate. This one was probably a weird one, right, with Nemitz, just because the production and kind of where the defensive market is at doesn't make a lot of sense to me. We hear about some of the Bowen Byram stuff and hearing some of the numbers that Nemitz is asking for. So knowing where the Devils are cap wise, and then knowing what they got in the deal, what were your initial reactions to the Simon Nemitz trade?
Yeah, well, so first of all, this happened. It was yesterday, right? I believe.
Yeah.
Or was it? Yeah, it was.
Yesterday was on fire.
Yeah, I was gonna say it was like maybe the 7th biggest news story out of yesterday or something like that. Yeah. So it was. To be completely frank, it was not the one that I was like thinking about when it happened. But it was interesting because you guys had mentioned that you wanted to chat about him like a week or two ago, and I was like, oh yeah. And kind of looking over the Devils, I was looking at both him and Gritsuk. And it was like, and it kind of got me thinking about how such a weird and maybe interesting in like not the best way the Devils are in, right? The place they find themselves in now. And I was kind of looking at like kind of some evaluation around their younger players because they don't have a lot of. What's funny is they have a lot of players like that are they don't have a lot of players that are signed long term right now. I mean, or forwards, I should say. Their defensemen are all pretty locked up, but they kind of are in a weird spot where they have some young guys. They're coming off of a very disappointing season. And I think, we went into the season kind of like expecting the Devils to take a step back, but the Met in general, I think the East in general kind of projected to be fairly weak, and it ended up kind of being that, but it mostly just was like weird in terms of the outcome. I think the Devils finished with maybe 6 points below our projections. So they underperformed. I mean, they weren't by any means the worst team in terms of performance versus expectation. I think Nemitz was an interesting one because the trade itself is kind of one of those where or like Luke and I, so we run a site that does projections, models, data, all that stuff, and I kind of try to follow a lot of the whole league. And this trade is one that I would usually look at and be like, I would defer to Devils fans to kind of evaluate where the team is at and like what they're trying to do, because it's one that's like, if they're trying to build, I mean, I think 2 first, even if they are late first or whatever, is like kind of not a bad haul. And I think Nemitz, to be frank, when I looked at it, I didn't necessarily see a player that is maybe one that you really want to invest like long term in. I mean, at least you would maybe want to bridge or maybe give another year or two, I think, to kind of figure out where the team and the direction that they're going is. But when I saw the trade, I'm like, oh, that's kind of an interesting deal that I feel like is kind of the opinion. I think it's always kind of tricky when a lot of picks are involved. I think it can be kind of difficult from a outside objective perspective, like view, if I'm not like the most well-versed in terms of like what maybe the Devils should be doing. So it's kind of one of those funny trades where I'm like, it's like, it could be bad. It could be good. I think very much depending on what you think the team wants to do or what their future should be. And I think for the Devils, it's like, there are multiple different perspectives on that. And for me, it's like, they're kind of in this no man's land of having some very good top end players on the team, but like also having an underperforming team. They have some players that they've signed long term that have so far not like lived up to that. I think Luke Hughes has been a big question mark for the team. Timo Meier has, for whatever reason, he shoots more than most players in the league, but can't score at all. Like, there's a lot of funny situations I think the Devils are in right now that the Nemitz deal is kind of it gives you an interesting look into like maybe where the organization views themselves right now. And whether that means that they're going to use the picks to trade or to maybe trade up in the draft or whatever, because I think they still have their first this summer, right? I believe. So, yeah, I mean, I know that's kind of not much of an answer, but it's kind of a funny, like, this trade to me is more of an indication of like what the team views themselves as right now, or like where they're going, and maybe not. They're like, I think we can move on from this, but I think Gritsuk is another player that I think, because they don't have a ton of free agents, or at least like high-end free agents. I think Nemitz was the highest one, and correct me if I'm wrong, because there's been, if I misspeak, it's probably because I'm just forgetting something, given all of the stuff that's gone on in the last couple of days. But I believe that we had, with Nemitz, he was like our highest projected contract for the Devils this summer. And I think we projected him at 6-year by $6 million, or a little bit higher than that, was what the projection, like most likely contract that we had from a projection standpoint. And which is, it's a kind of, that would be an interesting contract, I think. And so I'm kind of curious what you guys think. I mean, you already kind of covered it in the intro, but like, is that 6x6? Is that something that you would feel comfortable with for Nemitz? Or is that kind of like, maybe we want to wait a year or two before we extend him long term?
I'll say this: in a perfect world, I would love to wait a year. and given a year or 2 years or 3 years, like one of those contracts, like a true bridge contract, be like, show me that you can play defense, dude. Like, show me, like,
Yeah.
my biggest issue with Nemitz, and you know, you're not watching the Devils every night like we are, but he literally, like, he's one of those defensemen that too often his controller turns off and he's just staring at the play.
Yeah.
And I slip in behind him, or he doesn't see the crosser, or you know, he's not in the position for the rebound. Like there's way too much of that. In my mind, that's fixable.
Yeah.
When that's your biggest issue, like he's not a guy who's getting out skated. He's not a guy who's taking, you know, whose hockey IQ is in the toilet. He's just a guy who gets caught staring at the puck.
Yeah.
And I do think it's fixable. Like that's a fixable issue. So again, if you came to me and said that he won't take anything less than 6 years, but it's $6 million, I would have signed him to it because I think that the upside is there. He played incredibly well at the Olympics, which I know is not a harbinger of NHL success, but it shows that when he's the number one guy, something clicks in him. He's incredibly clutch. It's a thing that doesn't show up in statistics or logic or anything, but it just kind of happened. He scored more overtime goals than I think any defenseman this year. He just has this weird gene about him that he's what is it? Irrationally confident. Like he has that irrational confidence that you kind of need, as long as it doesn't split a locker room or like break anything down. I don't think he'd ever have that kind of power, right? But at the same time, I also have eyes and saw how he played defense last year. And it wasn't that good, right? He wasn't a good player. I think the Devils nuked his development. They did such a bad job developing such a high-end player, and that's why he's where he's at. But they did the same thing to Holtz. They sent Holtz to Vegas, and he sucked. So clearly they ruined. You could ruin a player that way and then you know, get nothing for him. So I think that there's that side of it. I think the way, and just to kind of go back, I think you might be thinking, because the Devils don't have any big contracts, but they have Nico's contract extension. So he has another year. So maybe that's what you were thinking of is like, that's the bigger contract. That's the biggest thing on the, you know, on the table right now is Heischer's contract. And I do want to ask you about that. But one last thing on Nemitz. Well, actually, I want to just talk to you about the one thing you mentioned where you said you didn't have them projected very well. And I am curious about that just because I think on paper or even in like the world of analytics where you're just putting numbers into a system and spitting out, you know, projections, I think you would think in that realm, Luke Hughes would take a step. Nemitz, in theory, would take a step based on the analytics of his, like, you know, Byron Bader's analytics had him looking, you know, projecting very well. You have Pesci, you have Hamilton, who both do really well analytically. You have Jack Hughes, who's probably one of the better analytics players in the league. What part of that wasn't turning into a solid standings projection?
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to jog my memory exactly on what would have been leading into like the season and kind of where our models were. To be perfectly honest, I think that there were probably some players that maybe from their skater points like looked a little bit better than maybe some of the more of the analytics, I guess, quote unquote, that we would maybe incorporate or that we do incorporate into our season projections. So I think like Nemitz is a good example where he actually did, like last season, did not grade out well by our metrics. And when I mean metrics, I usually am talking about our wins above replacement type model. And it's tricky because Nemitz is a really good example of like one of the issues sometimes that you can have with young players because he was a really high draft pick, right? Like he's a top prospect. He but it can be hard, I think, when a player is 20, 21, right? And so, like, usually, I think I remember talking with you guys about this a couple of years ago. I think it was maybe Jack Hughes' second season or third season. It was that we had him as projected as to become one of the best players in the league. And I think a lot of Devils fans knew that he was very good. It was a little early, like we were a little bit ahead. And I'm not trying to like, you know, pat myself on the back, but that was one that we got right. And usually, what you like to see from younger players is kind of the consistent thing we've seen is if a player has at least like average defensively when they're 20 years old, and like that tends to be a very good indication that not only are they going to continue to maybe be solid defensively, but that means it tends to have an indication in the trajectory of a model that their performance is very well rounded, and especially with like where his pick was. So I think heading into the season, the Devils also had, I think, some depth issues, but also like they're, I think, have had kind of some up and down results from several players. So like, I mean, I mentioned Timo Meier again, but he, he was one of our guys a couple years ago, and then he's kind of bounced around. I think Luke Hughes is another good example of a player that I think on paper, and at least from like his pedigree, is a player that is expected to be very, very good, but maybe from more of his history and his age hadn't really necessarily kind of grown into a player a model would pick up on as like one of a top caliber defenseman. And yes, obviously Dougie Hamilton is like he's been great for years. Jack Hughes again now at this point. I think one of it was it also is, and when I mean like they weren't, I mean that we didn't have them projected as like the best team in their division, right? It was more that I think the East was a little. We did still have them finishing, I think, third in the division, so they weren't like. But it was more that they weren't of the caliber that I think would have been a kind of a clear pick for like to win the division. So I think the Devils, just in general, they've been for years now. They've just been kind of a funny team, or like a weird team, because they've always seemed to have. They're like right there. They're close. Like you can almost imagine if the right things go the right way. Like if Nemitz had kind of bloomed into like a really high-end defenseman this last season, or if Luke Hughes had really kind of filled that role as well as the young players that they have. And then you could have seen something where the Devils kind of perform, and I can't really speak to the trajectory of how the Devils season went, but I kind of feel like they were a team that just kind of sat in the back seat the whole year. Like they didn't really make a splash. Like they were kind of like there, and it was like kind of uncertain in the East, but like I didn't really hear a ton about them other than the rumors around Quinn Hughes. Like that was kind of the big news out in general around like, oh, is he going to go with his brother? Like, is that what they're doing? And then I think I guess I keep saying this, but I just find the Devils kind of fascinating, but maybe not in the best way.
Let's talk about Quinn Hughes for a minute, just because we'll probably fight, and that's okay. Like that's friends fight sometimes. No, I'm curious to see from the Wild point of view, because here's the thing. I was told the Devils had this in their lap and fumbled it. They just Fitzgerald couldn't pull the trigger, and he didn't want to get Quinn Hughes without trading with Dougie Hamilton. And it was a fool's errand, or whatever. It was a mistake. Like he messed up.
Yeah.
The second best defenseman, maybe the best, because McCarr, the jury's out on McCarr, but a top 3 defenseman by any metric is in Minnesota with the Team USA GM, with a guy that everybody respects very highly, and a lot of so. Can you just tell me real quick what your reaction was when you got Quinn Hughes?
Can I swear? Because I was like, "Holy shit!"
Yeah. Sorry,
because I mean,
it'll be fine.
Yeah. Well, okay. So Quinn Hughes, like you already said, and this is backed up by pretty much everything that we have on our site, like everything I've watched for a couple years now. I think it's pretty much, without a doubt, is Quinn Hughes is a top 3, maybe top 2 defenseman. Like I think it's him, McCarr, Fox has always kind of been up there. Darlene seems to be up there. Like there's a few, but it's been consistently McCarr, Hughes, and our stuff, Adam Fox. Now I think Adam Fox kind of has a bit of a reputation that he maybe doesn't get viewed that way sometimes, but from a statistical perspective, he has been like rock solid. But my honest opinion of the Quinn Hughes was, I don't care like for any team what it really takes. You get that player, and then that's kind of what my reaction was. It's even more so than when they signed that extension for Kaprizov, like, which I actually think is kind of an overpay. I mean, that's neither here nor there, but like Hughes is a player that's like been that guy. And then it was funny. I was like, because we had watched Hughes on Vancouver for years, and I was like, dude, this guy is legit. Even if the Canucks are just complete dog shit, like he is a legitimate. Like you can just watch him. And then when I got to watch him on the Wild with everyone that I knew, that it was kind of funny watching him for a couple games, have to get used to playing with like actually like kind of higher in talent for the first time in a little bit. I mean, this is not turning into a Vancouver disrespect segment, but like it was a little bit funny where you could tell that he was like
they are disrespected by what they put on the ice.
Yeah, and Vancouver has been kind of a mess for a couple of years now. So like I think it's kind of fun to watch. Well, some of it is even as not and I will say that I'm not as much of a Wild fan as I used to be. My fandom has kind of gone into work now, and so I don't necessarily have that same kind of like wake up every day and like look forward to the game and have my entire day ruined when they lose kind of like fandom that I used to have maybe 12 years ago. But it was still very fun to kind of see it because I mean honestly, it's the first big. I mean, I'm trying to think of the trade, like even a trade. I think in the league there hasn't, let alone the Wild. I think the league, like in terms of a caliber player like that, I think the last one was you could maybe argue Rantanen, but like I think he kind of turned out to maybe not be that kind of player the way that he was viewed. But like for the Wild, I mean, he was the biggest thing they've gotten since, well, not out of draft, so like since Parise and Suter. I mean, like those are that's the last time the Wild have really added a player like this, and that wasn't kind of homegrown. I mean, they have had a few here and there. But most of their like kind of stars have really come from either their draft or from some free agent development. But it's like right now their top players are basically Kaprizov, who Eriksson Ek, and then like Spurgeon Brodin from years ago. Like all their players were pretty much kind of developed and from their system, and then. Yeah, and so like Quinn Hughes is just like kind of, and you watched it if you watched any Wild games, is like he just turned the team into a legitimate like. People thought they were a contender. Luke and I were still pretty skeptical that they were a legitimate contender. Now they were still a very good team, and they still, I think they put up a pretty good fight against Colorado, and Colorado turned out to be quite injured in the playoffs, and I think we saw that very heavily in the third round. But I think the Wild are still like kind of in a weird spot because they have they have this year left on Quinn Hughes. Like he's going to be, given Guerin's history, like he does not, shy away from giving out big contracts, and Quinn Hughes is. More so than Kaprizov is the player that you pay. So I'm kind of curious to see what the team does. And kind of just based on my hunch, this is not based on any information. The way that Guerin and Leopold have functioned, I think, and acted recently is like they're going to try with everything to try to keep them in Minnesota. Now we'll see kind of what the Wild do because they're kind of in a weird spot where some of their older players are transitioning out like into. I don't want to talk about the Wild too much. I'm mostly just maligning the fact that Jared Spurgeon is my age, which means he's too old to play in the league really anymore. And my favorite player is going to be phasing out here in the next couple of years.
That's funny. Yeah, hey, listen, I'm 37, so I'm kind of in that same spot where it really hurt me when I got past 33. I was like, oh, I'm no longer in my prime. Right, like the athletic prime, and now you're like, oh, I'm almost too old to even be allowed to play in sports. Not that, like, I'm not trying out for the Devils anytime soon, but it would be nice to have the option. But
yeah.
So let me ask you one more question about Quinn. What is the most, as a person who looks at these numbers? I know you have something on the site. I don't want to spoil the site. Go to Evolving Wild. They have contract protections, but what is the most you would pay Quinn on a 3-year deal, and what is the most you would pay him per season on a 5-year deal? You personally.
Well,
like
me.
Somebody who's these contracts.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I would say that given his age, given his like very consistent performance the last couple of seasons, I would pretty much as a team try to go full term on the deal. And an interesting thing, which I think I still haven't really seen people talk about that we're kind of watching, is I think it's September 15th of this year is when the max term limit cuts down to 7. So it's kind of an interesting. There's going to be an interesting. Okay, well then I got
a couple deals on Easter and on Hughes about how that deadline matters a lot more than July 1st. But
yeah, and I think that's something that I'm very curious to see how it impacts not just like the current free agents, but also extensions. Because I think there are teams, given the increase in salary cap, that are they want that extra term, they want that extra year for a player. So that out of the way, I mean, if you're doing a 3-year deal, I mean, I can just quote you what our extensions have, but I think it's got to be north of 13 million. I think on a full term right now for an extension, because we have this on the site, you can look at our players that are currently eligible, like that are heading into next season on their last year of their contract. He was projected at an 8 by, I think it's like 15.6 million. Like that's the current market. And I think right now there's kind of an interesting trend we're seeing in some of, I think specifically the Kaprizov deal, but also like there's some lower ones long-term, like team-friendly deals. And then there's like the McDavid deal that got signed. That's like, kind of has some impact in terms of comparable to what does that mean and how does the model look at that? But I think like you said a 3 and a 5, or was it a 3 and an 8? I think like it's got to be
today, right? He said a 3 or a 5 is what they were working on.
Yeah, and I think that it's an interesting discussion, I think, for a team because you're back to, well, not with him and specifically. We saw this a couple of years ago where players like Robertson and Matthews signed like 5 or 6 year deals to take themselves to UFA like earlier or whatever, or to like they didn't want to sign a full term deal when they were 22. Hughes is a little bit different. I think like a 3 year is at least 13 and a half. Like I think that's got to be where it starts. And I think like if you go longer, which I would argue any team if they had him should try to lock him up for the full 8 years. I mean that's just the kind of player he is. So I think that's kind of what you're looking at. And now what a trade looks like to try to get that player, especially on their last year, like, so just to get his rights and then 1 year is also a weird thing because it's kind of like, it's hard to evaluate what you need to give up to just get a year of a player when you're going to have to pay him, potentially like 15, 60 million. So yeah, I think the Hughes situation, to be honest, I haven't looked a ton into it because it feels like it's been kind of one of the things that will kind of work itself out in the summer and maybe not a right now kind of deal. But, I suppose anything is possible given what's going on this summer in the last week.
How much is a contract? So, like, the reports came out with Bowen Byram, and everybody has no idea what's going on here with Bowen Byram. But
Yeah.
the reports came out that they're looking to pay him like $12.5 million. How does that impact the model when like this outlier contract happens?
Yeah, honestly, it's a very good question because the way so for your viewers, and I think I've been here on here enough that I won't explain it too much. Our contract projection model is a combination of, well, we use the previous cap friendly data because we had a part kind of a data sharing agreement with cap friendly before they were acquired by the Capitals and don't exist anymore. But it's a combination of their data, and then in the last year and a half we've been tracking our own, like we've been manually tracking and keeping track of all the contracts ourselves. The model is set up that it just accounts for the prior 3 years of various different statistics that we have. Almost all of those, this isn't like trade secret or anything, is kind of box score metrics. GMs still pay players based on their box score metrics. I think there's some of that has to do with CBA and what's allowable in arbitration and bargaining and that kind of stuff. But there are a few things otherwise, like, I think like in the last 10 years we've seen, and with the Hurricanes now winning the cup, the joke that Corsi is now won, right, is like kind of like that. Now we've seen that actually like shot attempts like have kind of become impactful in terms of how players are paid. But what goes into it is basically every contract that we are able to, that we have data for, that then becomes kind of it's not really a comparable, but like a house comp is, it's not a direct comparison. It's more of a bunch of different data points go in, and then players that are similar to those kind of get projected in a way that's similar to, a player who's 25, maybe on an RFA. They're, a defenseman, they're signing with their same team, they're signing in the summer. You kind of get a group of players, and I'm speaking generally here, of who sign similar, and then that kind of gives you the number, more or less. It's a lot more complicated than that, but I'm trying to keep this simple. But so like when you have a huge outlier, and we've had these, usually what happens, and we kind of had one already with the Malkin deal. Usually what it is like there's players who are older who sign like a 1 year deal. I think Corey Perry and Nick Foligno did it with Chicago a couple years ago where they signed like 1 year, $4 million deals. Speaking of the Blackhawks, that was like way higher than what our model projected. And so I think Bergeron was another one that signed with Boston when he was like 36 or 37. That was like way under what we projected given how good he was at the time. So it happens. And I think usually it's kind of like, that's a data point. I think Byram's a funny one because it's like, and I saw this across the board yesterday. No one understood what was going on. It was like they're like, Davidson's the worst GM that's ever been in the league. Like they're giving up a 4th overall, which is, I think I heard, the first top 5 pick that's been given up in like 10 years or more than that. I don't know the last one that was given up. Yeah,
and the last time they got traded, it just got traded down, I believe. I think they traded from 4 or 5 to 9. So it wasn't even like a player. You know what I mean? This is such an outlier of a trade.
Yeah, and I like Byram is like, I don't want to be mean, and I don't necessarily like to, talk about it this way, but he is not like very good. I mean, like it's not like I get it if like he's young still. Like I think if you watch him, you can kind of see how he maybe there's pieces there, and like his points kind of back up that a little bit. I think like he's better. He grades out better from like a box score standpoint than he does kind of more of the on ice metrics or the underlying like WAR metrics, that kind of thing. So the thing that's interesting about Byram is for a player like him, a 25-year-old RFA defenseman who has got some points in his history, that actually is the model says the player is going to get kind of paid. And that's kind of what we're seeing now is I think that I think we actually had him projected somewhere around like 9 million or 9.5 million on an 8-year deal. And if the Blackhawks see him that way, then that's probably what they're going to pay him. But it's kind of a funny situation where, and it wasn't just like us. Sometimes it's just us with our metrics that are like, I don't know what everyone else thinks. This player has not performed very well. But everyone like around the league was like, this Bo Byram is not that caliber of player. And I don't know if the Blackhawks are just in their bubble and they just have they've, you know, the other thing that's hilarious with the Blackhawks there is like, you would think you'd want to go after like a forward to play with Bedard and not a defenseman that, you know, I don't know. There's so many questions I had about it. And I was like, I honestly don't really know what's going on. So I don't know if you have any more information. I think that's a player that it's Byram is a player that's actually like a really kind of scary player for teams because from a contract perspective, he grades out to be kind of worth a lot. But from an on ice perspective and from like pretty much even like your eye, if you just watch him, he's not the kind of player that you really would consider to be a high end defenseman. So I don't know. Honestly, I'm kind of lost at it like everyone else is.
I think here's what I think is that Byram came out of the draft as a guy who was supposed to be a super duper star. Like he was supposed to be like how could you compete with a team that has Byram and Cale Makar? Because I think when they drafted him, we already knew Cale Makar was really good. He was coming out of UMass. But I think people forget that was 2019.
Yeah.
Like that was the Jack Hughes draft.
Yeah.
Like that's how long ago that was. And people don't equate Jack Hughes and Bowen Byram because Jack Hughes has gone through all these different periods of his, of his career, and Bo Byram has kind of been in the same spot. He's a good kind of guy, like a second line guy. He's exactly what I think Simon Nemeth is, and Simon Nemeth is 3 years younger.
Yeah,
so it's like he's a second line guy who's gonna make mistakes. He's gonna frustrate the hell out of you. Can make these superstar plays. But is he going to do it in a 6-1 loss, or is he going to do it in overtime? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
So I always had Chicago. Sorry, I was going to say I had Chicago projected to go after Alex Tuck because sure, spend what you got a ton of money, nothing to spend it on. So why don't you go after the top free agent who you know is good? Like Alex Tuck is at least good. It's an overpayment. Whatever he's going to make is going to be an overpayment. But whatever. Like, who cares if you're not up against the cap? It doesn't matter how much you pay him until it does. So that's what I thought they were going to do. But giving up the 4th overall pick and then paying him 12 something, I didn't get it. Nothing of this makes sense. And I do think that Jason Davis or whatever his name is the worst GM.
I mean, what's funny is that with Nemeth, at least, like he's young enough where like you can look at his, like you said already, is like that's a player that you can imagine maybe his development was stunted or like he wasn't like put in the right role, and he's young enough to be kind of like turned around, if you will. And I'm not saying he's bad. It's more that, but Byram, we have 7-8 years of data that shows that he's just not very good, and it's like. I mean, sure, he's fine. He's a player that I think has that name recognition. So if you like care about that for your team, but it's just like none of this made sense because it's like, okay, well, yeah, like you said, if they're going to go after a forward, and Tuck, I think, was probably by all accounts like the best UFA that was available or forward wise, before he got signed. That wasn't an RFA. There's several good RFAs that are available, but Tuck, I think, now is off the board, and it's like the only thing I can think is that something fell through, like they had something in place somewhere else, or like they were like looking to do something else. Maybe it was with Buffalo, where like they had something in place for Tuck, and they wanted to still make it work with Buffalo because Chicago liked the fact they could give up their only first round pick this year. I don't think they have any other first round picks in 2026, and they're like still one of the worst teams in the league with actually no promise. Compared to like the teams. A couple years ago, the Hawks were in a similar situation that the Sharks were in, the Ducks were in, and you see those teams, and you start to see kind of where that team is kind of on the up and up now, where the Blackhawks are still, they're doing nothing. They're not giving Bedard anyone to play with. He's really struggled, and I think now I can say this. I used to kind of zip my mouth when I would say this, is that he's never looked that particularly great from our metrics, but he's really young, and he was super hyped, and the Blackhawks are a terrible team, and they've been for a couple of years. But like the Blackhawks I don't think they're heading into the next season any better, and I don't think that they don't have the picks this summer to really start build. I mean, like they've traded. I don't know. Yeah. Sorry, I could rant about this for a while because it's like, look, don't get me wrong. As a Wild fan, I'm totally fine to watch the Blackhawks struggle. I hated watching the Wild lose the Blackhawks for most of my whole life. So like watching them struggle, but at a certain point, you kind of want. Like you really want a player like Bedard who is so hyped and is like very clearly is gifted. You want him to be able to. You want to watch him like you watch Celebrini, right? And the Blackhawks are not making that easy for fans, you know.
All right. So last question I have for you is, and I really appreciate you coming on. We'll definitely hype up Evolving Wild before you go. But this has been great. We've gotten to talk about a lot of. I didn't expect it to go in these places, but I love when it does. I want you to tell me. Listen, I'm just going to be very blunt. This is a dog free agent class. This is terrible. But
yes.
Are there any contracts or the projections that you like? Like maybe it's young players that can project. Maybe it's things, or maybe even if it's an offer sheet, they're like, oh, that contract actually makes a lot of sense, and I don't think it would be matched. Like, is there anything in your model you're like, that sounds like something that would be really valuable for a team like the Devils who want to be a playoff contender?
So, I mean, I know I've said this already online, but I actually think that Jason Robertson, it might be the most interesting story this summer. And I know that he's a fascinating player because, yeah. And yes,
I've been told that.
And so from everything that our stuff says, and pretty much every way you look at it, Robertson is one of the best forwards in the league right now. And this is like not, I mean, even from a points perspective, I think he's like currently over the last 3 seasons, like his 14th in total points. So like, sure, for whatever reason, Robertson has this kind of reputation as he's not physical. Maybe he's not competitive enough. Like, I don't know. He doesn't like hit. I don't know. I honestly don't understand. I was very mad at Guerin for not including Robertson on the Team USA. Like, I was like, that's like an idiotic move. And it didn't matter because they won. I was mad that I didn't get to watch Jason Robertson play for Team USA in the Olympics. That was very annoying to me. Same with Adam Fox, but that's neither here nor there. So Robertson, I think, is we have him projected, I think, at an 8-year to like $12.5 million deal. Now, some people think that that's like, no, that's not a player. You pay that. And I say, you absolutely pay that player that money. Robertson, like, I mean, the thing that doesn't make any sense, I watched the Wild play against the Stars. I watched Robertson score from the same spot. I watched how he played. I've been watching Robertson since he came in the league with Kaprizov, when there was kind of the argument around whether Robertson or Kaprizov should win the Calder, and, Kaprizov being too old, all that stuff. Robertson is, I think, by far the best value player because he is just actually that good, and it's hard to overpay a player who is actually that good. Now, who knows? Maybe there's other things that we can't account for in the stats. I will give a small area of doubt, I guess, as a statistician. I should say that I can't be certain, but Robertson is the one. I think in terms of honest value. So I'm just working through our kind of free agent preview that we tend to have up on the site like the day before, maybe a day or two before free agency, so we can account for all the signings that happen late, all that stuff. The one that looks kind of funny from an actual UFA perspective is because I'm just saying this because I know how our models treat this, is Anthony Mantha. Is he every year when he's a free agent, our models love Mantha. He usually does not he's not looking for a lot of money based on his box score stats, but from his kind of other underlying like on ice metrics, he's been consistently solid. He's the one which gives an indication of, I think, of how bad this free agency class is. And now that you've lost, I think, like Radish is gone, Tuck's gone. I'm trying to think of a few others. There's a couple goalies actually that are kind of interesting that are available, and I haven't looked heavily into the goalie market. So like I know that there's some teams, speaking of, like Florida doesn't have any. They got Kachuk and now they don't have a goaltender. I mean, whatever. There's some interesting goalies. I think yeah,
Jacob Markstrom
and yeah, and I think the other one I think that I saw is Bussy is up. I would be surprised if he doesn't extend with the Hurricanes. I maybe have missed that. I don't think that's happening yet.
He already extended.
Did he? Okay. Yeah. So yeah, there's a lot going on. So like but I think the other ones that are interesting are just like some of the legacy players. Like Malkin already signed, but we still have Carlson and Ovechkin that are not signed. And those technically I think are like the last big free agents that are available. From everything I've heard, I think Ovechkin's kind of thinking on it. I think Capitals, if anything, it would be a 1-year deal. Carlson, they're both old, so like, but like I think John Carlson for a team could potentially be something. I don't know like how much a team really wants to give, but maybe that's kind of a Brent Burns type situation where he's able to play more of a depth role on a good team. I think the other ones, but really it's going to be about the RFAs this summer. And I think like specifically, I'm very curious what the Blackhawks do with Bedard, and also what happens with Robertson. I think those are like the two big ones. There were a few others I don't think Leo Carlson signed yet, but I could be wrong. I haven't fully gone, and I don't think I've tracked him or there's a few RFAs that I think are interesting, and I think offer sheets are really fun, but I've learned that they just don't really happen for the high end players. I think you get more of like the Broberg and Holloway type offer sheets as opposed to the Robertson and Bedard offer sheets, just because of what the cost is for a team to give up for a player like that. But I don't know. Honestly, this summer is shaping up to be one of the weirdest ones because the cap has increased so much, and we've already seen teams like. And this is one of the reasons I like to remind everyone that like the deals feel kind of high right now, is that when the salary cap increases, the contracts they go up, and this is just what we see. That's why the model we use relies on salary cap percentage instead of just raw cap hit, because it adjusts for the movable salary cap. And so I think like Alex Tuck, and this was an overpay bar model at 10.5, seems like really high. It was only about $1 million, or maybe not even $1 million higher than what we had projected for him. And like we've already seen a couple contracts that have been right on the money. Like the Darren Radish contract was like right on the money, spot on. I just saw Zach Benson extended, I think, with the Sabres. And that was, I think, 7 by 7.5, which is what we projected. So we're kind of seeing like some early trends of like teams are taking advantage of the money. I think agents also know that there's more money there. But I mean, Bo Byram at 12.5 would be like 3.5 or 4 million more than what what we would expect. So we'll see. I think those are, but the free agents class is not good. I think the other thing that's interesting, and cut me off when you're ready for me to stop talking, but is we've seen a trend. I think a trend over the last season, specifically the last year, of I think extension eligible players signing before the summer, more so than we had seen I think in prior years. And so there actually were less free agents kind of available this summer because teams have already locked up players. And I think some of that has to do with the uncertainty in the market, given the increase in the salary cap, and also the lack of the drop from 8 to 7 year on the max term limit. The minimum cap hit went up for the first time in years. So now it's 850, which I think is kind of, people don't think about, but I actually think there are far more players who get paid closer to the league minimum than there are players who get paid 7, 8, 9 million. And I think that also has a little bit of an impact on like kind of bottom line for teams. Not really, but it is something that we've been kind of eyeing, because it does. There are a lot of players who get paid league minimum or get paid higher, and they and to fill out a roster like that, it does kind of add up. Now it seems marginal, but it's something we're looking at. So my main point is there's a lot of stuff happening this summer, and I'm very curious to see if, like, we've already seen a crazy number of trades, like blockbuster deals already, like probably, I don't know, like 3 or 4. I mean, Nemitz would have been a really big news story if there weren't 5 other big things that happened the same day. And on top of Babcock, now is the Oilers coach, and also like talking of expansion. I completely missed yesterday. The Penguins have new ownership. Like, I was like, oh, like that happened, and I didn't even.
The Red Sox sold the Penguins.
I guess. I don't, honestly, it was just one of the things that someone that we interact with on Blue Sky was like mentioning, and I was like, dude, there's too much going on for me. I know I'm going to go on this podcast, and I know I'm going to make a mistake because I can't keep everything straight. So yeah, it's going to be interesting summer. I think the fact that there's so much more money out there in the market, and also the fact that the free agent class is really bad. I mean, this is probably the worst free agent class we've had in, I don't even know. I mean, and part of that is because teams are signing their players early or trading early and getting new players that are filling spots. So it'll be fascinating. I'm very curious to see kind of when the dust settles where teams finish. And then just also the main story I'm kind of watching is like, where does Robertson end up? And like, I think honestly, it seems to me like the vibes right now are like Ottawa's going to get him. That's kind of what I kind of feel like, and also kind of what I want. But the Devils are like honestly a very interesting player in this, and I think it would be fascinating to see if that's where he ends up. You guys would be lucky if you got him.
That's how I feel too. But Josh, I do have to let you go just because I have to yell at Sam, because Sam thinks that Jason Robertson is a bad player. So I want to give you a second. Let everybody know, everybody's going to be looking at where to find these contract projections. What's the best place to go? Evolving-Hockey is the best place to go. So take a second to just promote everything you guys are doing at Evolving-Hockey.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, first of all, for having me on. It's been a bit since I've guested on a podcast, and I wish I could pay myself for my contract to be on here. But
Marketing budget.
but
Take it out of the marketing
yeah,
budget. It's
yeah,
how
yeah,
the
yeah.
rich get.
We my brother and I, we're known as Evolving Wild on Twitter and Blue Sky, although we're mainly kind of over on Blue Sky now. But we have a website called Evolving Hockey. You can find it at evolving-hockey.com. You can follow the login or subscribe link that's on the front page. And we have, right now contract projections are one of our big things that we do, where we project all free agents and non-free agents, actually all players, but we display up front the current free agent class. You can find extension eligible players and their projections. But we also provide a lot of other projections and data. We just have general skater stats, like box score stuff. We also have WAR, XWAR, XG, line combinations, everything you can pretty much think of. In this summer, we're gonna have our fantasy projections. I think it's our 5th year doing these that we have out too. So if you're a big fantasy player, I will say my brother and I have done very well in our league using our fantasy projections. So that's one of the benefits of having a model that you that you can use yourself.
You gotta get a leg up. These people are crazy. You gotta get a leg up.
I mean, yeah, and it is kind of wild that way. But I think that's pretty much it. We also have, I don't like to do this when I'm on other podcasts and we make no money from it, but we also have our own podcast called the Evolving Hockey Podcast. So if you maybe don't want to look at tables, but you want to listen to people talk about tables, I would recommend you check that one out.
We love that. Yeah, no, please promote everything you're doing. You're a good friend of the podcast. You've given a lot of time for us, so please promote everything you're doing. Go listen to the podcast. We'll subscribe tonight.
Hell yeah,
because we love you guys. You guys do great work. And yeah, I really appreciate you coming on and kicking off our summer of guests. And we're definitely going to have you on soon. We appreciate your time, Josh.
Well, thank you so much for having me, and it's been nice chatting to you guys about the Devils and about the off season in the summer.
A lot going on. Thanks so much, Josh.
Take it easy.
Josh. That's Josh from Evolving Hockey. You can find him on X at Evolving Wild. Nick, I can't believe you put words in my mouth that I didn't say. All I said was no to Jason Robertson. I didn't say it was a bad player.
Four people sent me that. Four people, Sam.
Yeah, but I just said
no.
no.
Whole people.
I just said no.
Okay, why would you say no?
The cost all around. You have to make it.
It takes money to spend money. Do you think they shouldn't go after Quinn Hughes?
Should or shouldn't? I think they should. I mean, look.
Quinn Hughes is going to cost more assets and in salary than Jason Robertson.
Well, I think they need to be honest with you. I think the top priority is to figure out their goaltending situation before anything else. Before Quinn, before Jason Robertson, before anything. That's what worries me the most.
Yeah, so as soon as you got to pay him today, right? Like Hughes, you don't have to pay until next year. Like you can pay him today, but the contract doesn't kick in until next year. So that's the complicated part of the Robertson thing, is you have to fit him under the cap today. And to do that, I'm trying to think of the numbers. So the underrated part of the Nemitz trade is that you got rid of Siplikov. And I think he was making $2.25 million. So that gives you about $9 million to play with, give or take. You got to send Gritsik. Essentially, I think to pay Robertson, I think you have to come up with $9 million. So the simple thing to do is to get rid of Hamilton, but you have to replace him, right? Like now that you got rid of Nemitz, your right side can't be Pesci and Kovacevic. Even if you have Casey. The problem is I think Casey would be in the Robertson deal. It's a lot of catch-22. So I understand where you're coming from. But I think we need to learn a lesson from the Quinn Hughes deal. The Devils make the playoffs with Quinn Hughes on the team last year. I know how far out they ended. I know how good everybody played in the division, there's no doubt in my mind that Quinn Hughes takes his team to the playoffs. No doubt. None. Zero, zilch, nada. No doubt in my mind that the Devils make the playoffs last year with Quinn Hughes on the team. That said, so many times Tom Fitzgerald marched this team with a major flaw that you hoped and prayed would just work out. Whether it was goaltending, whether it was the hole in the top six, whether it was the lack of center depth, there was always a major flaw in this team that caused them to miss the playoffs because depth got stretched even thinner than it already was because of injuries. The players who you expected to play better just didn't. Guys you thought were going to step up just didn't. And then on top of it, you had guys who take a step back, like the Myers and the Mercers and the Luke Hughes last year. That being said, and Josh from Evolving Wild and Evolving Hockey just alluded to this, Robertson has been so consistent offensively and so simply fills in that slot in the top six to give the Devils possibly a top 5, top 6. I know it's like a mouthful, but like one of the 5 best or 5 most talented, I'll say, top 6s in the league. Because then you would have, in no particular order, Robertson, Hughes, Bratt, Heischer, Meyer, and Brown or Gritzik, I think would be the 2. But again, I see where you're coming from, where like the money has to come from somewhere, and it's going to hurt, and the assets are going to be extraordinary. I hope that they can do it like a Brady Tkachuk trade. I don't care when we first.
I'm going to say this. I'm wondering if Sonny, again, I don't know how he's evaluating this draft. I'm wondering if he can move up to get that sniper on an entry-level contract that's ready to play.
I think that ship is sailed.
You think so?
Yeah, the picks that we're going to move have moved. I wrote about this last night.
You don't think they
Devils
can get that second overall from San Jose?
No. The reason why San Jose got 9th overall is so that they could take Stenberg and a defenseman. I truly think that. I think that they were saying, I am going to overdraft a defenseman because we need a defenseman. And I know I'm leaving this really good player on the board who's probably better than who I'm taking. But they got the 9th overall pick so they could take Stenberg and then get, whether it's Veeroff or Schmitz or whoever, 9th overall as a defenseman. They're not going to get Chase Reed, who I think is who they really wanted, but I think they did like kind of a cost risk analysis, and they think they're going to have a pick of 2 premium defensive prospects at 9, and then they get Stenberg, who's clearly the second best player in this draft. So no, I don't think that 2 is available. I think it was, but too much has happened, and now people are set. The only one that's available, Sam, I think is 4. But I think 4 is available if you give Lindy Ruff Bratt. And Sonny Maeda is the guy who's the reason why the Devils drafted Bratt, and he's on one of the better contracts in the league. There's no way that Bratt's going to be available. Can you talk Lindy into Meyer for 4th overall? Listen, I would think that's crazy personally, but the market's insane right now. If I told you 12 months ago that the Devils and Sabres traded Byram for Meyer, a lot of people are like, okay, that kind of makes sense. But now if I told you that Meyer was getting the 4th overall pick, you'd think I'm crazy. But you'd also think I was crazy that Byram got the 4th overall pick. So I think in some weird inception sort of way, it's out there. But again, I think that the 4th overall pick is the only one that's available. But I think that makes the Devils' 12th overall pick even more valuable. Because when you go, like, I could go down the list and, like, Toronto's not trading their pick. Just over San Jose's not trading either of their picks. Vancouver's not trading their pick at all. Buffalo might, but the reports say that they aren't. They say they're going after a center. New York's not trading their pick. Is it Nashville at 6? Wherever Nashville is, Nashville's not trading their pick. 7, I can't remember. Is it 7? Didn't 7 get traded? Anyway, I went through all the teams. None of those teams are trading their pick. I think 1 through 12, if the report is true that Buffalo's not trading their 4th overall pick, I think the Devils have the most valuable pick that can be attained in a trade. And I think Sonny Maida knows that. I think Sonny Maida learned that. And I think Sonny Maida is going to switch his... Now that the Nemitz thing is taken care of, now that it seems like Nico Hischier is taken care of, I think he's going to say, when I look at the draft, Sam, I don't love how it's falling. It sounds like Bjork is going to get taken maybe the top 5. So that was a guy I thought was going to fall to them. Bell Schultz is a guy who I really liked. I don't think he's going to fall anymore. And then who's the other guy I really liked? Oh, Lawrence. Tynan Lawrence is a guy I really liked. I don't think he's going to fall. Because there's such a dearth of centers in this draft. So you're either going to hope that one of the defensive prospects fall. And I don't really want to draft another defenseman. I know you don't draft for need in the draft, but like, where are you going to put these guys if you keep taking them in the top 15? And
I would draft Ryan Lynn because it'd be Lynn's sanity in New Jersey.
I've seen him mocked to the Devils more and more over the past week. 3 months ago, everybody had the Devils taking Oscar Hemming, and I don't like Hemming. Personally, I think they're just taking him because he's big. I don't think Sonny Maida's going to do that. I haven't done enough research on Ryan Lynn to have a big opinion on it. I just didn't think that he was on the radar, but now it seems like he's really on the radar. So, who knows?
All right.
But that's all I got, Sam. We're way over. I apologize. We had a guest.
Yeah, and you're on the road, so you got anything to plug? You definitely do, because I'm looking at pucksandpitchforks.com.
Oh,
reading
Pucks
through.
and Pitchforks is buzzing right now. It is buzzing. So, first of all, I've extended my work. I now write across the Fansided network on the hockey side. I've always written for Fansided.com. I promoted some of those articles. Now I write for across the network. You're going to see me in a lot of different Fansided networks, just adding some articles of things I think are interesting. Wrote some Dylan Larkin pieces for Octopus Thrower. I've written some things for Editor and Leaf. I've written some things for Bleeding Blue. I might even write a Rangers article, Sam, just because it's fun that way.
Oh, very nice.
So I'll be writing across the, I've been asked to do this for Fansided. So, but pucksandpitchforks.com is just the place to be for everything. Jordan Kyrou piece about how disappointing it is that they lost on them. That's going up right after the podcast. I got another piece from Luke Garrison coming up right after the podcast that I'll get up. But yeah, I'll have 2 pieces myself. It's going to be a lot of draft stuff over the next 2 days, unless the Devils do something, with this stuff. But lots of draft stuff to talk about, Sam.
Yeah. What do I have to plug? You can find me on X at PrimetimeSamWoo. Also, just want a big shout out to everybody in the chat. I've been watching, listening, reading. I will say, though, not happy that Stan Fischler was not nominated for the Hockey Hall of Fame. the Elmer Ferguson Memorial Award. It's gotten to the point, Nick.
Before it's too late.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm willing, and I really mean it. I somehow I got to get myself in the Professional Hockey Writers Association. They will hate me. I'm going to tell you, they're going to hate me because I'm going to disrupt. I would disrupt that organization to get everyone to vote for Stan Fischler. Like, I don't know what is with these people at all. I don't know. That's another podcast for another day. Yeah.
All right, man.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, I want to thank all those tuning in, dropping the podcast in about 20 minutes. All of our podcast pages, Spotify, Amazon Music Prime, Audible, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, all over the place. And, yeah, go to pucksandpitchforks.com. Thank you. Maybe they'll hear from me tomorrow. You never know. Meow, meow. The draft is coming up. We'll have it covered. Free agent frenzy next week. Will Quinn be moved? Will he re-sign? Will Sonny Maeda trade those draft picks that he newly acquired to move up? Upgrade the team? We shall see. Till next time, let's go Devils.